Harvey Milk once said about Sylvester, "He's not just singing, he's teaching survival." In the late 1970s, in San Francisco's Castro district, this conversation between two LGBT+ icons was seen for years as just a compliment. But the truth went much deeper. Because Sylvester's survival lesson had begun when he was 8 years old. In that Pentecostal church in Los Angeles, while singing gospel songs. According to allegations, one night, when he was abused by a trusted adult at the church, his life changed forever. The terrible sentence the doctor said to his mother, "Your son might be homosexual," wasn't actually a diagnosis, but a conviction. And in response, Sylvester's family, the church, and society quietly chose to blame the victim, not the perpetrator. This is where Sylvester's real struggle began. And this struggle was powerful enough to carry him to the world stage. But nobody knew yet what prices would be paid. While sharing this story with you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Because untold stories like these can only come to light with your support. On September 6, 1947, in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles, Sylvester James Jr. was born. His mother Letha raised him in a Pentecostal Christian home after his father left early. At 3, his grandmother took him to church choir. His voice was extraordinary, gospel music flowed naturally from him. But the church didn't just teach music. The church also told you who you could be and who you couldn't be. By 8, Sylvester sang in the church choir, his voice already different, softer, more graceful. There were moments when Sylvester felt most free singing gospel songs. Standing by the church organ, listening to the congregation's applause, it felt like the whole world belonged to him. But one night, everything changed. According to allegations, a trusted adult at the church, some sources say it was the church organist, approached 8-year-old Sylvester. The details were passed on in whispers over the years. No official case was ever filed, but what happened was so violent that the child needed emergency medical intervention. When Letha took her son to the hospital, the doctor looked at her and said, "Your son might be homosexual." This sentence wasn't a diagnosis. It was an accusation. As if the victim, not the perpetrator, was guilty. As if an 8-year-old child had chosen what happened to him. And the most tragic part was that even Letha didn't fully question this sentence. Because the church had taught this, if something bad happens, it's because of your sins. The congregation remained silent. Nothing was done about the perpetrator. And little Sylvester returned home wounded not just physically, but spiritually. Something inside him had broken. But that would become his strength. At 13, Sylvester left the church for good. At 15, he discovered LA's gay bars. At 15, he started going to gay bars in Los Angeles, finally learning to be himself. At Jules Catch One, at that gay bar on West Pico Avenue, at drag shows, in places where no one asked your name, where no one wondered about your past. There, he learned to be himself for the first time. In 1969, he graduated high school in a blue chiffon dress. This wasn't just a clothing choice. This was a manifesto. This was saying, "You can't ignore me." And indeed, no one could ignore it. But this courage also meant loneliness. Because in 1969 Los Angeles, wearing drag clothing for a young black person meant not just exclusion, but physical danger. In 1970, Sylvester moved to San Francisco's Castro district. In 1970, Sylvester moved to San Francisco and joined the Cockets, an avant-garde drag troupe where he finally performed without limits. And Sylvester, here for the first time, was performing in a place where no one told him to behave properly. But the Cockets experience was not just freedom for Sylvester, but also a disappointment. But their 1971 New York show was a disaster. Sylvester took the microphone in the second half of that evening and said, "I apologize for this travesty that I'm associated with." He decided to go solo. After leaving Hibiscus and the Angels of Light group, Sylvester decided to become a solo star. His early bands and albums struggled. Rock instrumentation clashed with his falsetto. Critics said his voice didn't match guitars. But Sylvester refused to change. "I'm not a drag queen," he said. "I'm Sylvester." And this statement was his manifesto. But here's the irony of music history: sometimes the biggest failures are the beginning of the greatest discoveries. Because when Sylvester gave up guitars and turned to electronic sounds, he began to become the queen of disco. 1977 was the year everything changed in Sylvester's career. He signed with Fantasy Records and did something that later became legendary: he chose Martha Wash and Izora Rhodes as backing vocalists. These two women would later be known as 2 Tons O' Fun and then Weather Girls. But at that time, they were just two black women with powerful voices. And when Sylvester worked with them, he brought the gospel church order to the disco floor: Martha low voices, Izora middle voices, Sylvester high voices. This trio achieved such harmony that even studio recordings carried live performance energy. When the Step 2 album came out in 1978, it had two songs that made Sylvester immortal: You Make Me Feel, Mighty Real, and Dance, Disco Heat. The first song, with the synth layers produced by Patrick Cowley, made Sylvester's falsetto almost supernatural. Cowley was creating the high NRG sound using synthesizers, drum machines, and sequencers. The lyrics were simple, but the emotion contained was universal: You make me feel mighty real, you make me feel real. This sentence was the cry of a person who had been told for years that he wasn't real. Everyone from drag queens to excluded LGBT+ individuals, to people rejected by black communities, found themselves in this song. At San Francisco's gay bars, when Mighty Real played, people raised their hands in the air, closed their eyes, and danced as if in worship. Sylvester transformed gospel energy into disco ceremony. The album went gold. Overnight, he became an international icon. But this success didn't just mean applause and money for him. This was proof. This success was an answer to everyone who said you're not good enough, to everyone who said you'll never make it, to everyone who said you're a deviant. In 1979, Sylvester received the key to the city of San Francisco. Mayor Dianne Feinstein honored Sylvester in a ceremony at the War Memorial Opera House. When Harvey Britt handed him the key, the crowd gave a standing ovation. After Harvey Milk's 1978 assassination, this honor carried even more weight. But for Sylvester, this moment meant something else: his mother, after 17 years, watching him perform at an opera house concert. His mother Letha watched him perform. When it ended, they embraced. Years of distance melted away. He toured internationally: London, Mexico, Brazil, Japan. Studio 54. Andy Warhol parties. Worldwide fame. But fame exhausted him. Constant touring, endless expectations, the pressure to be perfect. But the bright lights of fame also deepened the shadows. In the early 1980s, Sylvester's personal life was becoming complicated on one hand, and financial problems were emerging on the other. Record label disputes drained him. 2 Tons O' Fun left to become Weather Girls. The money, the betrayals, it all added up. Then he met Rick Cranmer, his last great love. The two started living together, and for the first time, Sylvester didn't hide a relationship. He publicly declared his love for Rick on television, bold for 1980s. This courage was extraordinary for that time. But it also meant becoming a social target. He started receiving homophobic letters. Death threats came. But Sylvester didn't care. Because Rick made him feel real. Mighty real. By the mid-1980s, disco was dead. The Disco Sucks movement erased him from radio. Radio stopped playing him. His career stalled. And once again, Sylvester was reminded of what exclusion meant. In the 1980s, the AIDS crisis was silently approaching. Sylvester began seeing his friends getting sick. At first, it was like a strange pneumonia. Then more. But there was no name yet. It wasn't yet called AIDS. It was just whispered as gay cancer or gay plague. And these whispers began entering Sylvester's dreams. In 1982, a phone call came. Patrick Cowley was sick. Very sick. Sylvester rushed to the hospital, and when he entered his room, the sight he saw shocked him. Patrick was dying. They both knew what it was, even if doctors didn't have a name yet. Sylvester held Patrick's hand and sat there, silently. A few weeks later, Patrick died. The death certificate said AIDS complications. This word wasn't foreign to Sylvester anymore. Because in Castro, there was another funeral every week. Another friend was lost every month. And Sylvester started looking at his own body. That persistent cough, the cough that wouldn't go away. That unexplained weight loss. Those night sweats. It could all just be fatigue. Or something much worse. In 1985, when Sylvester went on stage during a concert, he realized his voice was betraying him. He couldn't reach the high notes. The falsetto was shaking. The crowd didn't notice, but Sylvester knew. When the concert ended, he sat alone backstage and cried. "My voice is leaving," he whispered. Rick came over and wrapped his arm around his shoulder. "Your voice will never leave," he said. "You're bigger than your voice." But Sylvester knew the truth, his voice was leaving. By the end of 1987, Sylvester could no longer deny it. He had undergone sinus surgery but wasn't getting better. His cough had intensified. He had developed neuropathy, his hands and feet were numb. When he went to the doctor, he learned that what he thought was bronchitis was much more serious. Tests were done. And when the result came, Sylvester wasn't surprised. He was HIV positive. And he had signs of progression to AIDS. The doctor didn't tell him how much time he had. But Sylvester read it in his eyes. Not much. He refused to stop performing. He publicly announced his HIV status, one of the first musicians to do so. He announced, "I'm sick, but I'm still here." On Thanksgiving 1988, he told his mother, "I'm not going to make it." Letha held his hand, "I'm always with you." This was the answer she couldn't give in that hospital room years ago, she was giving it now. In mid-December, Sylvester made a decision. He was going to Dreamland nightclub. Rick objected. "You're too weak," he said. "Stay home." But Sylvester insisted. "No," he said. "I need to dance one more time. I need to see them one more time." When DJ Steve Fabus heard Sylvester was coming, he prepared a special set. That night, when Sylvester entered the club, the crowd didn't recognize him at first. Because he was no longer the old Sylvester. He had lost weight, had trouble walking, his costume hung loose on him. But then the DJ took the microphone and said, "We have a very special guest with us tonight." And he started playing "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real." When those first synthesizer notes rose in the air, the crowd turned and saw Sylvester. There was a moment of silence. And then, the entire club stood up. "Sylvester! Sylvester! Sylvester!" they started shouting. Tears, applause, hugs. Sylvester walked toward the middle of the dance floor. Each step was an effort, but he didn't give up. When he reached the middle of the floor, he stopped. He put his hand on his heart. The crowd moved toward him and suddenly everyone started shouting, "We love you." Tears streamed from Sylvester's eyes. He was too weak to dance, but strong enough to feel. His hands rose in the air, and when that famous part of the song came, "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real," his lips moved. No sound came out, but everyone knew what he was saying. And that moment was more valuable to Sylvester than anything. Because that night he understood, he was mortal but his music was immortal. His body would perish but his voice would live forever. As he left the club, Rick supported him. Getting into the car, Sylvester turned back and looked at the club's lights one last time. "Goodbye," he whispered. Rick asked, "Where are you saying goodbye to?" Sylvester smiled. "To everything," he said. And from that moment on, Sylvester never went back to a club. He never went on stage again. Because now his time had come. He spent 5 weeks in the hospital with pneumonia. He refused morphine, he wanted to feel alive until the end. On the morning of December 16, 1988, Sylvester's breathing slowed. Rick and Letha were with him. His last whispered words, "Baby, I don't feel good." As Sylvester took his last breath, his lips moved. No sound came out, but everyone knew what he was saying, "Mighty Real." And then, silence. At 41 years old, Sylvester James Jr. left this world. That voice that broke at 8 years old was silenced forever. But the echoes he left behind would never be silenced. When Sylvester died, his will had written something clear: he was donating all music royalties to AIDS charities. Organizations like Project Open Hand, the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and similar ones were able to help thousands of patients thanks to Sylvester's legacy. He had planned his own funeral. He didn't want to touch somebody's life sung because that song hurt too much. Instead, gospel hymns were sung. And Martha Wash and Azora Rhodes, once again, accompanied their old friend's voice. This time Sylvester wasn't on stage, but his spirit was there. He was buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery, Inglewood, California. A simple message on his tombstone: Sylvester James Jr. 1947 to 1988. Mighty real. He was inducted into the Dance Music Hall of Fame and honored by the Library of Congress. Prince, George Michael, Bruno Mars, all influenced by his falsetto. House music DJs made his tracks essential. His voice lives on. His real legacy was teaching survival to anyone who dared to be themselves. Because Sylvester took every pain he experienced, every exclusion, every break, and turned it into a song. He was expelled from church, judged by family, excluded by society, rejected by the industry, defeated by disease, but never silenced. And those songs are still played on dance floors today. Because some voices never fall silent, even after death. Harvey Milk was right: Sylvester wasn't just singing. He was teaching survival. A survival lesson that began with what he learned at 8 years old. When he silently suffered in church, the world told him you're worthless. But years later, when Sylvester went on stage and shouted, "You make me feel mighty real," he told the world, "I'm here. I'm real. And you can't ignore me." And maybe the most powerful thing was this: Sylvester broke but reshaped himself. He was silenced but spoke louder. He was rejected but accepted himself. He faced death but gained immortality. And in the end, he became mighty real, powerful and real. Just as he should have been. Today, when a young queer person is discovering their identity and struggling with society's pressure, when they listen to Sylvester's songs, they feel something: you're not alone. Others have walked this path before. And they survived. And you will survive too. Because you're mighty real too. A pain that began at 8 years old ended at 41. But the music created will live forever. And on every dance floor, at every pride march, in every young queer person's courage, Sylvester's spirit will keep dancing. Because some voices never fall silent. Some lights never go out. And some people, even after they die, continue to be mighty real. What does it cost to be yourself? For Sylvester, the price was paid throughout his entire life. First at 8 years old in a church. Then when his family chose silence. Again when society called his identity a sin. And finally in a hospital room, his voice silenced by a disease the world refused to acknowledge. But every payment wasn't a loss, it was an investment. An investment in a future where someone like him could exist without apologizing. Where mighty real wasn't just a lyric, but a birthright. Sylvester lived 41 years. He spent 33 of those years after his trauma building something from broken pieces. That's 33 years of saying yes to life when life said no. The compound interest? It's still paying out. Every time a teenager comes out and survives. Every time someone hears "You make me feel mighty real" and realizes their existence isn't a mistake, it's a masterpiece. Sylvester weaponized his trauma. He took the voice they tried to silence and turned it into a falsetto that shook stadiums. He took the body they said was wrong and dressed it in sequins. He took the love they said was sinful and proclaimed it on national television. Survival isn't passive, it's the most aggressive act of defiance you can commit. Sylvester's work isn't finished. The same forces that hurt him at 8, excluded him at 15, erased him from radio, and let him die at 41, they're still here. They've just changed costumes. When we say never forget, we're not being sentimental. We're being strategic. Forgetting Sylvester means forgetting the lesson. And forgetting the lesson means repeating the trauma. If you've made it this far, you're part of the story now. You have a choice. You can be the congregation that stayed silent, the executive who said his voice didn't match, the society that looked away. Or you can be the DJ who played Mighty Real one last time. The mother who said, "I'm always with you." The friend who held his hand. The legacy keeper who makes sure the next generation knows his name. The question isn't whether Sylvester's story matters. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Sylvester's journey teaches us the ultimate lesson: your breaking point is not your ending point. It's your beginning point. The moment they tried to silence him was when his voice became unstoppable. The moment they tried to shame him was when his pride became unshakable. The moment they tried to kill him was when his legacy became unkillable. We tell stories like Sylvester's to make you understand, the power they tried to take from him, the power to exist, to love, to create, to matter, was never theirs to take. And it's not theirs to take from you either. You are mighty real. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you exist. And your existence, like Sylvester's, is an act of revolution. So the next time you hear those synthesizer notes, that falsetto that shouldn't exist but does, "You make me feel mighty real," remember, that's not just a song. That's a battle cry. That's a promise that no matter what they do to silence you, your voice will outlive them all. Some voices never fall silent. Some lights never go out. And some people, even after they die, continue to be mighty real. And now you know why. If Sylvester's story moved you, don't let it end here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel to discover more untold stories of resilience and resistance. And most importantly, tell your own story. Because you're mighty real too. And the world needs to hear your voice. Comment below, what does mighty real mean to you? Let's keep this conversation alive.